This podcast is a project of the Medina Focus, with the goal of providing space for collaboration and community among practitioners to the Muslim diaspora in North America. As people around the world have immigrated to the West, many Christians have realized that they live and work in the midst of the nations, and they often feel alone and unprepared to communicate cross-culturally. If you're looking for conversation and community surrounding issues of loving Muslim friends in Jesus' name, we welcome you into the conversation.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Medina Focus podcast. We're so glad that you are joining us. I'm here today. I have Nate Schultz, who's our producer and co-host, also with me. And we're going to be talking about a term. I'm very jealous of this term. I did not coin it. It's a older friend of Nate's, who's also a fellow diaspora worker in Europe, coined this term. And the term is gospel remittances. And so in our circles, we often talk about diaspora missions and diaspora peoples, but there are many cultural phenomena or artifacts that are dispersed, that transcend culture. Things like technology, things like finances. And so most of us who are in the diaspora missions world are very familiar with people who come to various countries in search of work, and they might live very, very frugally, very cheaply in where they're working, and they send back money. This money is called financial remittances, and there are lots of studies done in how productive this is and how this impacts global poverty and all kinds of other things. But Joey has coined this term gospel remittances, and I like this term because Nate and I are always talking about how does the gospel flow from one place to another place. Of course, tons of studies done using the homogeneous unit principle, where we study how does the gospel flow within a particular people group. And now that we're in the age of diaspora peoples and missions, we're able to look at, well, how does it flow from one branch of a people group, one segment of a people group, to another segment of the same people group that just happens to be dispersed. And so I think gospel remittances is a great term. So today we're going to be talking about something called media to movements. Now, if you're listening to this and you're like me, this might be a very new concept for you. I was introduced to this by Nate, I think, who attended a conference or a webinar or something on it. And so Nate was explaining it to me. We thought, man, this would be a great podcast episode. And so he's got a couple of guests for us today. The first of these is Tim Cowley. He's the founder of Gospel Creatives Collective. This is a network of media missions creatives, or a community of creators, if you will. And they focus on using media to movements to try to spark gospel movements around the world. He's also the host of the EMDC podcast, and this podcast highlights the use of media, tech, and communication strategies. They're eager to see more indigenous creators. I find that really cool. We want to see indigenous creators equipped to tell their own stories, useful in launching greater movements to Jesus in unreached areas. In 2021, he began documenting in a short video episodes his own process of being trained and grappling with media-to-movement concepts for the creation and launch of strategies that focus on the Yawa people, who are from southeastern Africa, where he lived for 13 years. And I've been able to see a couple of shorts. I don't know if these are the full episodes or what they'll be like exactly, but I've seen a couple of snippets of that video series, and so we're definitely waiting very expectantly at what that will look like. But it seems to be very interesting. Our other guest today is Carlos. Carlos lived overseas, and he was ministering to an unreached people group. During the coronavirus pandemic, he returned with his family to the United States, and he had heard about a group doing outreach using social media called Media to Movements. And they were using social media to see church planting movements among the nations. He didn't have any extensive background with social media creation, advertising, filmmaking, etc., but the Media to Movements folks offered to train him and some friends, and in June of this year, they were able to launch their own social media outreach to their UPG. And so one of the factors that like these push-pull factors that we're so familiar with in diaspora missions certainly can be things like medical problems. Typically, that's kind of for us as the missionary when we go and we get sick and have to come back, but also can be global where, everyone has to go back and everyone has to be separated. And so it's an interesting timing that Media to Movements is, I think, able to seize right now. And I hope that as you listen to both of our guests today talk about how they've been introduced to this concept, I think they would both say that they're relatively new, but I think because of their relative newness might make this a little bit more accessible to those of us who are probably like Carlos, who just kind of have zero experience doing, social media marketing or video editing or anything like that. And so I think they're really great for us to hear from and learn from today. Carlos and Tim, welcome to the program. We're so glad to have y'all on.
Thanks. It's awesome to be here. Yeah, good to be here.
So many of our listeners are personally active on social media, and they're also very active in extending the kingdom to the Muslim community, but they might not have considered how do these two go together. And so can you tell us, just in general, what is Media to Movements? Is this like a secret club? Is there a handshake? Is it a philosophy? Like, what does it take?
Good question. I'm gonna defer to Carlos because he is further along in this process as a practitioner. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, so Media Movements, there's no secret handshake. It's more of a general philosophy of using media to start disciple-making movements around the world. Media to Movements cast a wide net. We share Christ and the gospel over social media. Then kind of like an inverted funnel. We are interested in trying to encourage those who are seeing our social media to respond with the hopes that we can meet them in person and kind of develop that relationship further. We hope they'll get saved and know Christ, and movements of people will come to Christ. We hope for that as the result.
Yeah, that's definitely a great intro. Thanks, Carlos. I think, by casting a wide net, it's kind of like when you're on social media, when you're on Facebook or whatever, you kind of create this page that you're basically using that to try to reach people in a certain community. So you might have thousands of people that are looking at your things, but only a couple of them are really going to filter down to actually being interested in learning more about Jesus or wanting to get involved in like scripture studies or something like that. So, we're talking small percentages out of the masses. It's a little bit like advertising. If Coke has a billboard up, man, like most people are going to drive by and ignore it, but a couple people are going to be like, I'm really thirsty, and next time they pull into McDonald's, they're going to get a Coke. But that's going to be such a small percentage. So we're really just looking for and trying to actually weed out those that want to just argue with you or are upset with the fact that you're trying to introduce Jesus maybe to a group that might not look at him as a savior. So that's the wide net philosophy.
So is this something that people kind of just take on their own and figure out as individuals, or is there kind of an association of people that are doing this together? Is there a way to do it, a way not to do it, or is it? Tell me a little bit more about how it's organized or not organized.
Yeah, man. Carlos, I think you probably chose a different path than I did. I kind of investigated a bunch of different things to see what was the best onboarding procedure. Carlos, how did you jump into this?
Yeah, we heard of a group that was already, they were kind of the experts already involved in this field, and we asked them to train us, which they were more than happy to do, because we were wanting to get involved. We just didn't know how to get involved, what to do, and so asking people with experience, people with knowledge in this area, kind of experts in the field, I think that's been a good path for us, and it's really helped us learn and kind of understand how to outreach over media.
Was that mediaToMovements.org?
Yeah, remittances.org. Yep, that's the place to go.
Okay, yeah. So as I was investigating this earlier this year, like I've been around this for a couple of years, and I didn't really understand that question exactly, Nate. It was like, how do you jump into this? And in my case, it's like I started talking to different people that I heard of that were doing this kind of thing, finding out how they got trained. But I basically learned that there was 3 different on-ramps. And similarly to a hospital being one entity, you're going to have a triage unit, you're going to have a recovery unit, you're going to have a group that's going to help you to get to the point where you need to be to graduate out of the hospital. That's kind of like what this is like. And they all sort of intersect with each other. And so none of them are competing against each other. They all have different ways of helping you along this journey, because this is like running an ultra marathon. In my case, I took a 5-week online cohort class through Mission Media University, and that web address is that's missionmediau.org, and they've got like a checking foundations of media to movements course. So there's probably 20 to 30 people in there from different places in the world. And we read stuff, we interacted once a week, we did a lot of homework. So it just felt like an online course. And it helped me to build a strategy by the end so that I knew like what were going to be my main places where I would try to do this. It would be like Facebook and WhatsApp based on the people that I'm trying to reach out to. That's where they would spend their time. But then there's also, apart from mediatomovements.org, there's also Kingdom.training. Yeah, so as I understand it, I took more of the formal class that was 5 weeks with Mission Media University. Kingdom Training, I believe, will help coach you and train you in this, but they also have a self-starting kind of system where you can just hop on, you can sort of read the resources and then get caught up to speed. So a couple of my friends went through it that way, where they felt like they were able to then move on with creating a strategy.
Yeah, that's right. With Kingdom.training, it's more of a kind of a self-guided course, which is different than what you're talking about with the Missions Media, where you're actually kind of going through kind of something a little more official. Kingdom Training has more videos. You can watch the videos. You can kind of do it at your own pace. There's not like anybody that you're kind of going alongside with. Whereas then also with the mediatomovements.org, that's more of kind of a launching point where you can kind of get more information about Media to Movements and then connect with people who are already practicing, just for resources, for training, for, collaborating, those types of purposes.
Carlos, this question is more for you. I know you've got a bit of a unique story coming into this topic. Would you tell us a little bit about your journey returning from the field during the pandemic? How was this disorienting, and then how did you use Media to Movements? What's God doing through you right now with that?
Right. Yeah. Well, we originally didn't know that the whole pandemic was going to happen. We had packed our bags thinking we were visiting family and friends for a few weeks. Literally, as we were flying over and landing, the pandemic was hitting. It was unexpected. We would have for sure packed our bags differently if we had known that a pandemic was coming. We would have said better goodbyes to our community overseas if we had known what was coming. Then once the pandemic began, we were scrambling for a place to stay for a few months. But soon we realized the pandemic was going to continue for longer than a few months. So we began exploring what it would look like to try to continue our ministry, not being overseas, not being with our people group in our community overseas. And so we started looking at finding a diaspora location that we could kind of continue to do the ministry, and then Media to Movements really came at the you could say came at the right time, or exactly as God had planned, but it was kind of a perfect mate toward doing a ministry, remotely or online.
So what are some of the details about how you actually do this? What is like a day in the life of, or what's the process for, how you go about it? What are some of the details?
Yeah, so reaching out through media has some similarities with how we reach out to people face to face and in the community. We're still sharing truth. We're caring about people. We're speaking in their heart language. Certainly when it's appropriate, we're being culturally sensitive, and we're being sensitive to the Holy Spirit. So a lot of the same things with more traditional ministry are still there with media ministry, but there's obviously some differences as well. We're casting a wider net than we were, living overseas in the community. We were able to reach more people than we were previously able to do, just logistically. We can cast out the message of Christ and see who responds, like Tim was saying, see who the Holy Spirit's drawing, and then we can devote time and resources to those people. And so that's, kind of the Media to Movement effect or process. We're still trying to get to a face-to-face meeting, something personal, but media kind of allows us to filter, to get to that point, kind of the whole advertising analogy, advertising process that Tim mentioned with Coca-Cola or any other product. And then it just allows for those of us who have giftings in media to really use those for the kingdom. Those who are filmmakers, those who are gifted with social media, with website design, things like that. Those really those types of giftings are needed and really effective in a media outreach, as you would think.
Building on that, Carlos, I think you are correct in saying that media people are needed, but also some of the people I know that are very effective at this have just been learning on the fly how to create memes. They're not media people at all. They're just willing to get their hands dirty. And that's super exciting because a lot of people that are doing well with this are even older, like in their 60s. One guy that I'm thinking of specifically, he just dove into it and he's just learning as he goes. And he has no media background at all.
Right. That's a good point. And the same for me. I don't have any media background as well.
So what I'm after, I guess, is what I'm interested in is how you start going about it. Is it Facebook? You create a Facebook page and you use, Facebook ads, and then you have to get into the keywords that you're looking for in terms of how you find the people that you want to post the ads in their space, or how does it specifically work?
Yeah, it can differ a little bit, but the way that we've done it is that we have created video and media content and use those over Facebook, broadcast those over Facebook, and then also connecting that with a Facebook page where we make video posts or oral posts, and then we also have a website. So between those three, we get our media out to our people group, and then we encourage them to respond over Facebook Messenger, over WhatsApp, some kind of messaging app, so that we can continue the conversation.
Yeah, and you would have to be super careful to know where your people group that you're trying to reach spend their time online. Mm-hmm. Because Facebook isn't global. Like, it's not the highest social network in some other countries. So, what is the level of literacy of your people group? where do they prefer to hang out? What's their target? Like, are they young females? If I'm thinking of America, maybe young females would be more on Instagram and less on Facebook. So I wouldn't use Facebook to try to reach young females.
Right. That's a good point.
With my message.
Yeah,
so yeah, you just have to know your audience, and you have to do a lot of research, really. And you have to not just do the research, but actually, spend time in those spaces yourself, trying to familiarize yourself with how others are using those kinds of platforms.
So you bring up an interesting point, which is, who is the audience and what are they like? And even just the idea that different age groups, different genders, and different nationalities are all interacting in the social media world online very differently. One other layer to this whole discussion is the challenge of orality. And I know this has been around the missions world for a while as we've thought through, publications where everything used to be very print heavy. How do how does Media to Movements deal with orality? Is it helpful? Is it a challenge also for you guys? So what does that look like?
Yeah, so for us, our people group is oral based, and that just obviously just changes the way we need to communicate with them. And so because they're oral based, we can't rely on typing. We can't expect people to read. So we rely more on audio messages and videos, on sound. We talk over voice messages. Bible passages have to be spoken. We just learn to work around the traditional methods of writing and reading, and it works out pretty well.
Yeah, I'd say for the group that I'm trying to eventually reach, we tend to have videos that are going to be part of that strategy, and audio, scripture audio. All those kinds of things are going to be much more what we would use. People can totally navigate their mobile devices without being able to read. They learn how to do that. They know iconography and what things do what. They can maybe figure that out. But we obviously don't want to have a lot of literature or blog posts or anything like that as part of our strategy if most people aren't going to be into reading. And those that can read, they a lot of times don't have a tradition of reading much. So we want to keep things very basic. We wouldn't expect them to be book readers necessarily. There might not even be books in their language that they can get on a regular basis. So just thinking very much about video and audio. That's really key.
That's so interesting. I was thinking about how you would design something to attract attention without using words too much, like having iconography in your splash pages in visual form. That'd be really interesting. Hey, Tim, I know that you are developing a community of creatives. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, what that looks like?
Yeah, the genesis of that came about as I was finishing my time in Mozambique. I'd been in the area there, Southeast Africa, for 13 years, and felt a little bit like a square peg in a round hole. I'm a filmmaker and a graphic designer and a photographer. So using those artistic skills in a missions context was something that I didn't see many people doing. And in fact, I felt like the only one that could do it for anywhere like within hundreds of miles. I just didn't know others doing that kind of thing. And I thought, man, this is such a unique skill set that really could boost the abilities of so many teams in outreach and even in their own donor strategies and those kinds of things, if they only knew how to do some things. Even basic photography, like how do you take a good picture? It's super underutilized in a lot of newsletters, and people just don't really know how to take pictures. So as we were transitioning off the field in 2016, we moved to Portland, Oregon, and I felt that let's see what we can do to bring people together to try to encourage one another, and also look at how do we train others, how do we find people that have those kinds of abilities and put them on teams that can use those kinds of skills. So I created something called Expat Media Pro, which was kind of my nascent idea that at this point, 5 years later, is now transitioning out of that name, but we've created a new community called Global Creatives Collective. And the idea is that this could be somebody that is a national, say, for example, in Pakistan or Afghanistan, but they're a follower of Jesus, and they want to use their skills to see the kingdom expanded. They might be working for a nonprofit that does something to help children or whatever. It doesn't have to be specifically faith-based, but those of us that are in this community are all faith-based, and we're all trying to use our skill sets as God created us, because obviously we know that teachers and doctors and these kind of people have been in the missions world a long time, and we know that their skill sets are super useful, but a lot of times the bezalels, the people that have those artistic abilities aren't usually recognized as being critical. But now we're in this visual medium age where everybody has to present something that looks captivating. We're trying to catch people's eyes or ears. And even though in some ways COVID has made it so that we're all used to hearing from people that don't have much of an audio background, or they're recording out of their homes where there's chickens or people in the background, that's actually leveled things where we're now able to not feel so put off by the fact that we might not have a media background, might not have the best microphone out there. So yeah, this community, globalcreativescollective.media, is sort of the space that I've created along with others to try to network each other and see how we can encourage one another. And so that is sort of, I get funded under, through donors and churches that help to fund that under something called Reliant Creative. And so I try to spend time letting people know about events coming up, whether that be a trip where they're looking for someone that's a photographer, or maybe a film project that people can participate in, or something called ngostock.com, where somebody's an editor with an agency and they're looking for something from, say, Indonesia. Then we can find usually clips or photos or something from specific areas, or even find someone based there that might be able to help shoot for them, so that you don't have to send an expensive videographer from California to go do something. So yeah, it's come and gone in terms of the effectiveness, I think, in some ways, but we're always trying to recreate what's working and what's not. So yeah, it's an exciting place. And that's how I met Carlos, and that's how I've been able to also assist a number of different ministries. Right now I work full time helping ministries with their media needs.
Carlos, how have you been, interacting with that group? Has it been fun?
Oh yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Right, like as I said before, this is not my background, and so I am like everyone else. I'm a learner, and maybe even more so. And so yeah, it's great to connect and to learn from one another, and kind of learn as you go, so to speak.
Yeah, and there's been a group called EMDC, which everyone's like, what does it stand for? Well, not really anything anymore, but the idea is that it's for people that are involved in global ministry to be able to now come online, emdc.info. You can go in there and you can get enrolled so that you can actually attend classes online that are kind of geared toward whatever your interest is. If you're trying to get better at audio or video or some kind of communication strategy, or even how to tailor your products so that they will actually appeal to the people you're trying to appeal to. These are all specific ways that we can up our game. And we're talking about people that really, some of them have background in media, but a lot of them do not. So this really is an exciting initiative. There's a lot of overlapping universes. I think that we're all about trying to help you get better, because God's gifted you. You're unique, and we want to see you do what you feel God has called you to do.
So one thing that I think about when I think about technology joining around the world, connecting people together, and this is really, you guys are right in the middle of this current. This really is a diaspora concept. And so for diaspora missiologists, or even just secular diaspora theorists, they talk about, the various things that cross from one boundary to another, right? Things like money, things like financial remittances to families. So a family has, siblings or children that go and work in all these countries, and they send money back to the home family, the home tribe. religion, culture, ideas. We see K-pop having a huge boom here in the States as pop culture has made it across, and of course the internet has made that easier. And I see in many cases where technology is really one of these joining diaspora bridges, if you will. And so, whether I'm sure you guys are aware of this, but whether you're aware or not, you guys are in a diaspora field maybe differently than practitioners on the ground trying to reach, this community or that community in a particular city. But what do you think about the impact of kind of local diaspora ministry, maybe as it relates to Media to Movements? Do you think it's possible to see the connection between the here and the there, right? Doing work in ministry here, whether that's, electronically through social media or, face to face. Do you see a connection between those two?
Yes, yes, and yes. But Carlos, man, maybe you have some examples.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for one thing, our media outreach is global in and of itself, which is obviously one of the nice things about media outreach. We can, send ads. We can have a social media presence really anywhere in the world. It doesn't have to be located to our immediate location. And also because of that, our team can be based around the world as well. And we can have, we can reach a target audience, across the globe, and affect that community because of that, without even, with most of us not even setting foot in that country or that location. So it allows us also to partner with those outside of our, even outside of our own ministry circles and ministry teams, and expand our team to include those who were, in those locations, who can do some of those face-to-face meetup type of roles. So yeah, for sure, using social media allows us to work with people outside of our zones. As far as diaspora work, diaspora work is of course needed as well, but then with the way that the world is so global, many of the people in our diaspora communities are traveling back and forth. They're communicating back and forth with their family. As you mentioned, they send money, they call, they do video chats, they use Zoom, they use WhatsApp, they use Facebook, all these different social media platforms to broadcast to their friends who are back home in other parts of the world. So I think technology has made things so that you can communicate and so easily, and also traveling. A lot of our diaspora friends will go back and visit, or they'll have family members that'll come from abroad or things like that. Yeah, so it's so easy to make a world impact. You're not restricted to working in a fixed location.
Yeah, those are great examples. And any of us that have lived overseas, we know that we don't disconnect from our home when we go overseas. We're still getting information on the local news, and we're trying to keep up with what our friends and family are doing, what they're thinking about, and politics and faith and your church communities. All these things are important to everybody as they move from place to place. So lately I've been researching some of those different kinds of ways that the diaspora is being used in even producing media to reach diaspora communities as well as people back in homelands. So I think specifically of Syrians. There's something called Breath of the Soul. That was something that Create put out from Sweden, actually, that is focused on a Syrian story in Sweden. But these are, people obviously from Syria and kind of what they go through as they struggle through refugee life in Syria. There's a group, I believe, out of Australia that I'm trying to find out more information about. I think they're focused on Afghanis that have produced something in Australia focused on that people group. There's, of course, there's a group out of Minnesota that I'm thinking of who really wants to use the Twin Cities as the perfect example of how they could get top-notch talent from especially Somali-speaking communities or whatever it might be that are considered unreached, these are people, some of them that have become believers, that you can actually put together amazing productions, whether that be audio or film, in that local community language, so that that can be useful in not just the diaspora communities around the world, but also back in their homelands. And so obviously with WhatsApp, with YouTube, these are ways that we can watch something globally. We can share things globally, and nothing is now off limits because we're not sending a physical DVD somewhere. We're
Right.
watching it all online.
Well, Tim, I know that you have a specific focus on the Yao people, and you've been working on a documentary, and I'm sure that that has entailed quite a bit of a journey for you in terms of your experience along the way in building that relationship wise with the community, but also you're trying to bring awareness, draw awareness to that people group for prayer and other things. How has that been working out? Tell us a little bit of the story of that.
Yeah. So I have a documentary series called Sick in Africa. I was sick a lot in Africa, but especially a lot of my friends and family members also were sick in Africa. And so what I realized was, as I was seeing the stories of my friends, that I didn't understand so much about why they thought they were sick, or where they went for help, why they sometimes went to the clinic, why they sometimes refused to go to the hospital, even having owners, like you couldn't go to the hospital if so-and-so's brother hadn't been contacted first because they were the owner. Like there was all these things, intricate webs that would allow for healthcare opportunities in places like where I was. So I started following the stories of some friends and just people in the village, and thought I was going to make a documentary about this so that people would understand that there's so much more than just sticking a Band-Aid on something or fixing somebody's broken bone. You have to understand the culture behind things. And so back in 2016 or 2017, like the first episode came out that was 19 minutes. And it was part of a master's program in digital storytelling. So it was like my capstone project. And then after that, I realized, I could do several shorts. So the next one became a 5-minute story about somebody that was born with some epilepsy, and kind of they went to a traditional healer and how that went. And then they tried the hospital and how that went, some different things along that. So right now, this year, I'm trying to actually push out the basics of a number of, hopefully all of the rest of the stories. There might be, 3 to 6 more stories that I can pull out of this, that all comes from filming over a 6-month period in 2015. And so I'm trying to basically showcase different avenues and different things that are going on in this one region among the Yao people, so that it can be useful for not just cultural anthropologists or medical people, but people going overseas to recognize that your values, your ideals, the things that you think might not work wherever you're going, and that you have to just learn, ask. And even here in the States, as we're seeing diaspora communities come to the cities around us, people are starting to become aware that, maybe the Hmong community has different thoughts on illness. And maybe we have to actually figure out what they think instead of telling them, no, you're wrong, you're stupid, here's the truth. So just trying to basically build bridges between cultures. That's what this whole process is about. And I've been learning that it's been 5 years since I left there, and I've worked on my filmmaking since then. Some of my things aren't beautiful shots. That there's a lot of things that you wish you could do better. You wish you could reshoot. But overall, I think it's coming together, and I'm excited over the next couple of months to have some an anthropologist work with me to help me actually make this into more of an academic exercise as well, that won't be hopefully laughed at by people that want to use this in research or in higher education. That's my thought. A lot of the good thing about this is that, like, this footage has become sort of a big rock for me, I guess, as you could say, where I have a lot of clips that I can use from filming over a number of years or shooting events. I can actually use those in media to movement strategies. And I've been able to learn some of the different things that are, it's really important to them, like these initiation ceremonies or these dances, or, what are some of the things that they just love that makes them feel like this is us. I can actually pull from those archives really to be able to craft now strategies and messaging that might specifically apply to this people group.
So this sounds like there's a balance here. It's like it isn't something that is only for technologically gifted people. It's not just for professional filmmakers. It sounds like there's an element of that there's room for people just figuring it out who have basic skills. So what do you guys think about that? Who do you think could do this? Are there some minimum specifications that you need to have, skills that you need to have to be able to do it, or can you figure it out on the road?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I don't think that. I think just a heart to reach the nations and a willingness to learn. I think there's like Tim mentioned, there's such a community that is building and growing that is there to help you, help bridge the gap between what you know and where you want to go. And again, I would check out mediathemovements.org. And there's a team waiting there that's interested to coach you and help you, and check out the resources that we mentioned with that one, and Kingdom.training, and was that the Media Mission View?
Yeah,
those are 3 good places you can go.
Yeah, there are even Zoom calls that are happening and things like that where practitioners are getting on and saying, hey, I'm having this trouble, or Facebook advertising shut me down because, I used a dagger picture when I was talking about Abraham killing his son, and now they think, it's like, or you get all kinds of weird false positives that actually will make you run into all kinds of frustrations. But you've got to have a passion for a people group. This isn't like a general, I want to reach the nations, what can I do? This is like usually,
Right.
hey, I have a specific passion for this specific group. In Carlos's situation and in mine, we both came from the field, so we want to carry on what we were doing, and we just see our ability to do so magnified even from the distance. Whereas, if we were there on the ground, we might actually just be driving people to the hospital and actually doing things that are a lot more hands-on, which we do miss. But this is at least one way that we can still stay involved, even though we're not physically there anymore. So it's really about the connections. We help each other. We all know that we're not trying to silo, but we're really creating this level playing field where each of us is learning and growing and sharing with one another. There's a podcast that John Rawls puts out, Expat Media. That's a great resource as well because it keeps up to date on all the different things going on. There's a guy that is based in India, and he comes out with like a new thing every week about like 5 minutes on social media things that are happening. So Instagram is letting me do this now, or YouTube is letting me do this, so that you can kind of just keep in the know. But you don't have to be that into it. You just do what you can. It can be time consuming, so hopefully you've got some spare time. But you can also hop on with a coalition and be one part of a larger cog.
Well, Tim and Carlos, we are looking forward to hearing more of the productions that you guys are working on, and just hearing, Lord willing, the stories of how this is being implemented in the kingdom. Thank you guys both so much for taking time and coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, this is great. I love it.
You've been listening to the Medina Podcast. This show is hosted by Brian Hebert and produced by Nate Schultz. The conversations we have on this program are born out of an expanding environment of collaboration among grassroots ministry practitioners across the North American continent. Click subscribe in your favorite podcast app and take a moment to help us get the word out to others by sharing this program freely. If If you would like to engage on a deeper level, please email us at medinafocus@vision59.com.